With the conclusion of 2021 and after watching 120 plus shows for the year, I have somehow managed to put together a top 10 anime of the year. I think my short list came out to almost 20 shows, but I somehow managed to scrunch it down, as painful as it was, because there's nothing more controversial than giving top lists on YouTube. So with that said, I hope you'll stick with us as we go through my top 10 anime of 2021. As always, I definitely recommend people to go down in the comments down below. Let me know what your favorite 10 anime was, if you can make a list of 10. I know that some people don't watch as many shows as I do, but I definitely love reading them. Now, to get some ground rules set in place, I purposely go out of my way to not include any shows that did not conclude in the year itself. So things like, Ranking of Kings, which I absolutely adore, will not be included in this list. Also, shows that are above 50 episodes are disqualified as well, because they are just long going and they have that pre-established story that just kind of makes it a little more difficult to, put up against shows that are single core and stuff. So with that said, let's jump into it. For my number 10, I have Kageki Shoujo. Now, this is a series that I absolutely treasured. It essentially follows several girls who end up joining this school that trains girls in revue, or all-girls stage play. As we quickly find out early on, several girls that are actually admitted in this year's schooling were actually typically girls that normally they wouldn't pick, but it seems like this particular year, the faculty is trying some new things and bringing in some new blood into the mix. So not only is it difficult to get into school, but there's also a lot of competition between the girls themselves. As we find out, there's not many positions in the actual revue itself. Typically, you'll have one cast every single season every year, so that essentially means each season of it will have only so many slots. But despite this competition, obviously everybody has their dreams. And as those dreams clash, you end up finding that there's a lot of difference in each one of these girls and the struggles they go through. A lot of the girls have issues with body type. A lot of them have issues with their dreams. Some don't have dreams. And really getting to each one of those girls and their different stories was absolutely thrilling for me. I absolutely loved it. Some of them were extremely heartbreaking. Some just had me at the edge of my seat, just rooting for them, hoping that they'll succeed. And with Sarasa, the main character in the middle, who's kind of more bubbly, and you can kind of see her as a little bit ditz, she definitely has the ability to kind of bring people together, despite the fact that there's so many rivalries in this particular school. But yes, I can't say enough. Please go watch Kageki Shoujo. It was an absolute treat for me, and definitely deserves to be in one of the best anime of 2021. For my number 9, I have Taisho Otomi Fairy Tail. Now, this was an absolute gem when it aired, and definitely taking a storytelling from a different perspective. Obviously, the Taisha era. Opening up in 1921, we follow a guy named Tamahiko Shima, and he is essentially obviously from the Shima family, but he finds himself injured. And after being injured, his father basically exiles him. Like, he's broken. He no longer has control over his dominant hand. And so now, isolated in the mountains of Chiba, he kind of goes there and just kind of expects that he'll just die away, that he has no existence, no reason to live anymore. But in the wake of this, his father ends up purchasing a girl to send to him as his wife. And so what we get from this point on is two people who are essentially in a dark place or an uncomfortable place, slowly realizing that the two of them warm each other up. As this girl is kind of ripped from her family, bought to cover her father's debts, sent to the stranger's home, but the stranger welcomes her in and gives her a place to stay, thus giving her the comfort that she needs, and thus she kind of returns that favor and kind of helping pull him out of the darkness that he's in. And the relationship of the two of them that they build is absolutely pure and so adorable. I absolutely love seeing these two grow, and again, pull each other out of the darkness that they're kind of in. And as it goes along, really kind of pulling a lot of the family members of the Shima family into the picture and showing these different sides of their stories. Every bit of it was an absolute pure joy for me. And even when it gets in more heavier topics, I think it handled it really well. All the way up until the end of it, that just had me at the edge of my seat wondering, what is going to happen with these characters? I was absolutely crushed. I cannot say enough that this was an absolute gem and something that a lot of people probably overlooked. Please give Taisho Otomi Fairy Tail a chance. It's definitely one of the best shows of 2021. Moving on to number 8, we have 86. I didn't plan that actually. This show was amazing. Now, unfortunately, we still have 2 more episodes left of part 2, but I can easily say based on part 1 and what we have had of part 2, this show was really amazing. And it's really shocking to me because based on what everybody was saying about the first part, that it covered this first volume and that the writer had no anticipation of going beyond that first volume, I can honestly say after getting into the second season or second part, the writer knows what they're doing. The writer is phenomenal at really creating this world and expanding it further and further. The conflicts that these characters have is really heartbreaking, but at the same time, absolutely fascinating. Because it's not a war story. It essentially follows this Magnolia, which is this region that essentially is being attacked by these unmanned drones. And the way to combat it is they basically have sectioned off their entire kingdom into 86 districts. And the 85 have the people of the Alba, but everybody else is in these camps in this 86 district. And they're the people that are being forced to fight for them, even though all the people of the Alba have this idea that they're being unmanned. But the military know, and the military see the people of the 86 as less than humans. They see them as pigs. And that's just heartbreaking to watch. When you have one character, this one girl, Lena, who's actually a part of the military, doesn't see them as pigs. She actually sees them as people, and is very heartbroken by the fact that she is a part of this nation that's doing this terrible thing. But you have that conflict of like, well, you're still in your tower, and you're not on the battlefield with us. Don't act like you're equal. The stuff that it gets into with that is really fascinating. It's heartbreaking at the same time, but it's really fascinating. And again, like I said, getting into part 2, just expanding the world more and getting into other surrounding nations was really, really fascinating. And I just cannot wait for more of this series. I absolutely love it. It looks amazing. And yes, Sawano Hiroyuki music in there that I just eat up. I love his music. He just somehow makes these battle scenes so much more epic. But yeah, I absolutely love it. Definitely number 8 of my anime of the year of 2021. Definitely go check it out if you've been missing out on it. Moving on to my number 7, I cannot go a list without talking about ReZero. As much as people want to claim that it's the next ex-girlfriend right there with Sword Art Online, I love it. I love it every minute of it. I cannot get enough of this series. And yes, for those that are unaware, it essentially follows this guy who is isekai'd into this other world, and he doesn't seem like he's powerful at all. He's just a regular kid. But he finds out really quickly that when he dies, he actually resets to a certain point. Like, he has these save points that he can achieve. But if he dies, he'll get reset back to that point. But everybody else, even though he retains his memories, everybody else gets reset. So he's able to kind of take things from different vantage points, all to kind of find a resolve for the situation, mostly seeking to kind of save the people that are around him that he's learned to love. And yes, getting into the second season, part 2, where we're just getting into a really crazy arc that, honestly, with the first part, I was getting a little bit frustrated that we were kind of stuck there. But with the second part, we finally have seen a resolve for that pretty much. And I just love the character developments that have happened. And like I've said before, the thing I've always loved about ReZero is that this creator has such an expansive world and so many interesting mechanics within the world that I so want to see more of and see unravel. He does have a habit of kind of creating more questions than answers, but I'm loving the answers that I get as I go along. And as long as he can keep giving those little pieces of nuggets of information to me, I'm perfectly fine with it. But it leaves me just craving more. I really do hope this keeps going on. But I've loved it to death so far. But yeah, ReZero second season part 2, definitely one of my favorite of 2021. Moving on to probably my most controversial listings is the Eden Deities No Only Peace is my number 6 of the greatest anime of 2021. Now this one opened up very controversial. That was obviously a scene at the end of the first episode that definitely off-put a lot of people. And I was even off-put by it. But when I kind of get into this story, what I realized really quickly is that this is kind of a world where you have a writer who's willing to kind of create things that are not PC. We'll just say that. They're not PC. There's a lot of unfortunate and disgusting stuff that happens in this world. And that's kind of the point. The writer has really no filters. We're talking about the creator behind this original story was the creator behind Interspecies Reviewers. This is somebody that just kind of does whatever they want to do. And what I think came from that with this particular story was, again, a world that has no filters. And a writer willing to do anything to really give you an idea that, yeah, these people don't really see things the same way that we do. It's essentially a world where you have these beings known as Edens. And the Edens themselves are actually created from the cries and the prayers of mankind, or at least any kind of being, but it's typically from mankind because mankind have thoughts. But what you find out really quickly is that these Edens, despite the fact that they seem like that in the past, they have fought against the demons, they don't really kind of see things the same way that people do. So if a human says, these people are doing something really terrible, they're like, well, we don't really get that. We don't understand that. We don't comprehend what you see as bad. On the opposite end, we think that early on that all the demons of this world have been sealed away. But what we actually find out is they've kind of hidden themselves amongst the humans, and they're actually a part of this nation that is currently conquesting across the entire globe. And what kind of unfolds over time is the Edens trying to figure out where those demons are to kind of take them out. At the same time, you get a perspective from the demons themselves as they struggle to survive, how they kind of reproduce, and how they'll manage to survive in the future. And again, kind of getting into the mechanics of the Edens and how they come to being. I found this show to be extremely fascinating, and I loved every single bit of it. Yes, it was unsettling quite a bit because, again, the writer is trying to depict these demons as not really seeing things the way that humans do, but necessarily what they need to do in order to survive. And again, a lot of that is just very unsettling stuff, and I found it very fascinating. Now, granted, the ending of this entire season was quite a cliffhanger, I will say that. And yes, the original writer put the original work on indefinite hiatus, but there is still hope there because Kokyo, who is obviously the one that created Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid manga, is currently taking over it. And I hope that they have some information of exactly where the story should go from here, because I'd love to keep going on with the story because I absolutely love it. MAPPA did a fantastic job on it, some great animation pieces, and yes, some really interesting very neon type art style for it that I absolutely adored. But yeah, easily one of the best shows of 2021. I loved it to death, and I cannot wait for more. But again, keep in mind, if you're very sensitive about certain content, be aware that this does not have any filters. Now, halfway through it, moving on to our top 5 list, we start things off with number 5, which is, of course, Wonder Egg Priority. I absolutely love this show. This was the show I think of all year long, was a show that every single week I was clamoring, like, I need this episode now. I need this episode. When is it going to post up on the site? I'm clicking refresh and refresh. It is a show that I could not get enough of. And it's a show that, as it went along, it just kept getting better and better. Now, besides that finale that they created later on, we're going to take that and we're just going to discard that. Don't watch this show. If you watch the show, do not watch the last episode. Just act like it never existed. That's my... Because everything else was a fantastic show. All of it was fantastic. For those that aren't aware, it essentially follows a girl named Ai Oto. She's going through a very dark time in her life because she lost her friend due to ending her own life. And she ends up finding this place where she can acquire this egg. And this egg kind of hatches inside of this dream state. And it hatches a girl that unfortunately has in the past, again, ended their own existence. And the whole goal in this dream world is to essentially fight off the thing that drove them to their end. And if they can successfully do that enough, there's a promise that they can essentially help the one that they've lost in the past. So Ai Oto, who has lost her friend in the past, there's a hope that she can possibly save her. And so Ai Oto, along with all these other girls that she eventually meets and befriends, are all fighting for the same purpose. They all have somebody they've lost in the past. Now, there's a few things that were going for this series. Obviously, this being an original series, Cloverworks was trying to go just completely crazy with the animation for the series. It looked absolutely gorgeous. There was maybe 1 or 2 tripping points they had for a couple episodes where it seemed like the quality came down. But overall, especially the combat sequences, it was just bombastic. They did some absolutely phenomenal animation on a lot of these scenes. And even the scenes where they're not crazy action, there was some beautiful shots, vivid colors, again, very beautiful character designs, and again, a story that is both tragic, heartbreaking, but has a sense of hope as well. As we find out that despite Ai Oto going through the things that she has, it seems like she has a very caring nature and a very positive nature that people kind of are drawn to. And don't even get me started on the backstory stuff that absolutely... There was a backstory episode that was so well directed. It had my gut wrenching. Like, it was that stressful to watch. It was such a good episode. I absolutely love this show through and through. Again, every single episode. Again, we're both tragic getting these stories of these different girls that have gone through something and, again, unfortunately have ended their own existence. But at the same time, there was so much good here. And again, some positive messages in here that absolutely had me. I loved Wonder Egg Priority. And my only hope for that last episode is that eventually they will announce a second season. I don't know that they will because they've already kind of gotten into more original works since then, but there's still hope there. Moving on to my number 4. If anybody knows Andrew, they know that he loves Super Cub. This is a show that was an absolute treat for me last year. It was a show that every single week, again, it was one that I was kind of clamoring for because it was kind of my sugar show of the week. Like the show that I turn on and just has me smiling. That was Super Cub. It essentially follows a girl named Kogumi, and she unfortunately has really nothing. It opens up her narrating the fact that she's a girl who has nothing. She lives alone. She has no parents, no siblings. She goes to school. She has no friends. She comes back home. And that's basically her routine, just her being alone and kind of in a dark place. Until one day when she's passed up by somebody that's on a motorbike and she's on her bicycle, she decides randomly, you know what? I'm gonna go check out some motorbikes. So she goes to this one store, talks to this old man about wanting to get a motorbike, and eventually he kind of totes out this Super Cub. And she's like, well, how much is it? I don't have much money. He's like, it's cheap. I think it was like $100. And she's like, okay, I'll take it. He's like, well, it's known for killing 3 people or something like that. And she's like, it's fine. I'll take it. And so you kind of get a quick idea. This guy's just trying to help her. He's just giving her a real cheap bike just so you can be happy. And sure enough, the moment she starts riding this thing, she just has this big smile on her face. Again, it's a girl who's had nothing, who gains something. And it's through this Super Cub that she meets other girls, she gains friendships, she starts doing things. It kind of expands her world outside of this routine that she had before. And it's the simple stuff. I know it sounds simple, but it's how it portrays it that it's no longer simple. It's something that's a joy. It's a feeling of wanting something to be for somebody. Like they have this thing now that they have. And seeing somebody gain something, there's something special about it. There's something special about somebody discovering and expanding the world and coming out of a dark place that I just cannot express enough is absolutely a gem. But that's why, for me, despite the fact that not many people watch Super Cub, as much as I just chimed on my listeners and my viewers, it's a gem. And it is definitely one of the best shows of 2021. And if you like Super Cub like I did, definitely check out Akabe's Sailor Uniform. It's a show that's airing in the winter 2022 anime season. It is wrote by the artist who did the art for the light novel of Super Cub. Not the same writer, but the artist. And it definitely has a similar feel. So now, the top 3. We're getting closer to the end. For number 3, I have Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid S. I am so overjoyed by the return of Kyoto Animation. I absolutely love the studio to death, and I'm so happy to see them getting back on their feet because, as we've seen with Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid S, they are still a premier studio that is just so good at really animating things and bringing things to life. And now the weird, interesting thing with the second season of Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid is that it wasn't as comedy-focused as the first season was, but what we ended up getting from it was stuff that I absolutely loved. It was getting more into the characters, their mindsets, what these creatures are, these dragons coming from these other worlds, the clans and everything that happened in the other world, and these conflicts that the characters themselves have. Yes, you do still have sprinkles of comedy. You still have plenty of absolutely adorable scenes, especially kind of surrounding Kana and Ilulu, the new character. But at the heart is a lot of heart. Getting into these characters and their actual relationships, and I absolutely adored it. Getting into Toru and Elma and really kind of finally getting a resolution with the two of them was really fantastic, and just so many fantastic stories just sprinkled throughout it. I absolutely love this season of Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid. It has always been a gem for me. Every week, I just look forward to it. Like, here it is. There's my Miss Kobayashi Dragon Maid. It's time to watch it. I loved it to death. I could not get enough of it. I'm sad that it's gone again, but I can always rewatch it, I guess. I love Kyoto Animation. I'm so glad they're back, and I wish them all the best in the future. Moving on to my number 2 of the best show of 2021, we have, yes, Odd Taxi. Odd Taxi was an absolute perfection incarnate. I cannot say enough. Just go watch Odd Taxi. You could just you could shut down this video right now and go watch Odd Taxi if you like. I wouldn't be mad. Odd Taxi is literally perfection in writing. I could not get enough of this series. And it's so odd because at face value, I wasn't really sure about the show. I seen the artwork and I'm like, animal people, what is this? This isn't anime. I don't see anime characters. This is animal stuff. I don't care. No, it actually took another content creator that I kind of watch on a regular basis was actually analyzing it, and I'm like, wait, there's something to analyze in Odd Taxi? So I fired it up and I started watching it, and I'm going, okay, wow, this is a very realized world. Like, it felt like a living, breathing world. This is obviously a world full of, again, animal people, but at the same time, it felt like a real cityscape. The streets were just bustling. You had all these characters sprinkled throughout this entire big city. And despite that, it was all interconnected. How this writer interweaved all these character stories. And yes, technically, the whole crux of it is this one character, Otakawa, who's a taxi driver. So that's kind of helps interweave their stories because he's the guy that's kind of, sometimes, bringing people from one location to another, so it kind of helps. But to how you have all these stories, all these characters, all these misfortunes, and all these struggles all somehow interweave in such a masterful way. I was like, this writer is masterclass. I cannot believe how incredibly well thought out this story is. All the way until the very end, which just had me at the edge of my seat trying to figure out how is this going to resolve, and who is behind this, and who's behind that, and is this person going to find redemption? Is this person going to get over this situation? All these stories, I'm like, how is it going to wrap this up? And it knocks it out of the park so well. Now, granted, there's one remaining thread, and we're kind of assuming that will probably be answered in the movie that will be this year, I think April 1st. I cannot wait for it. Because, again, this writer's amazing, and I cannot wait for more of this series. I love it to death. Please go watch Odd Taxi. It is a masterclass of storytelling and an absolutely amazing series. It's obviously probably going to have to go somewhere in that my of all time list. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I need to do that soon because I think I've built enough new content to probably push into there somehow. But yeah, Odd Taxi, please go watch it. And for my number one, don't turn it off. I know people are already turning it off because they know exactly what I'm going to say. They're like, yeah, whatever. I know what number one's going to be. We already know what number one's going to be. Yes, my number one is easily, without a doubt, uncontested. Now, Odd Taxi did fight. I will admit, Odd Taxi fought this thing to death, tooth and nail. But yes, Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation, Part 1 and Part 2, it was just masterclass. Like, unbeatable story. I cannot express enough how amazing this story is. If you're living under a rock, you don't know what this is, essentially a guy who is a 34-year-old, I think. He was a NEET, pretty much lived his entire life after, even when he was schooling, he just became a NEET. He was bullied, and so locked up into his room all the way up until about his 30s. He ends up getting kicked out of his home, and as he's walking down the street, he ends up trying to save some kids and gets hit by a truck. Transported to another world, reborn there, where he essentially is trying to create a new life. He realizes really quickly, despite having these trappings of being a NEET, having that fear of going outside, he's kind of accepting this new life. And at some point realizes, this is my chance to actually have a life. Like, I'm no longer that 34-year-old that lived his entire life stuck in his room. I can have a life, a new life in this world. I have an opportunity here. I have potential, because it's a world with, European setting, it has magic and swords and stuff. He has the opportunity to do something special here. He has an aptitude for magic. He's gonna start learning it and all this kind of stuff. And he paves a new life. And this new life is obviously full with, twists and turns. There's these turning points that completely just flip the table over and make him just thrown into an unknown area, which again is these developments in his character. Now, obviously, Rudy himself is a very flawed character, and that was a huge kind of conflict that a lot of people had in watching the show. He's a perverted NEET, and now he's in a new world, so he still has a lot of those trappings, those otaku trappings that obviously get in his head, and you hear a lot with his narration, but he's changing, and that's the weird thing. It's a flawed character that, even me, I personally don't agree with how he goes about things, but he's flawed and he makes his own choices, and he's learning and he's stumbling, and I love that. I love flawed characters. I love characters that I can say, you idiot. Yeah, especially in the later episode of the second part, it's like, shut up. you should open your mouth, shut up. It's good stuff, and there was so many extremely impactful moments throughout the series. Like, so many points where I'm like, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Like, it got stuck in my head. What just happened in this episode? What just happened in this episode? What is the character thinking? Trying to really dive into the mentality of an exchange that two characters have, and what it really means for the two characters. Having something that makes you think that much about what is the consequences and what is the driving force of a character is truly remarkable. And it's writing that I absolutely love. And to add in that, I haven't even got started on the studio. Studio Buying, the studio that was created to adapt this entire thing, did such a phenomenal job. The director themselves having their concerns about even doing this, but yet they're doing it. And they're doing it so beautifully. Visually, this is unmatched. Just how they create the environment, make it believable, put so much into it, so much eye candy that you have to absorb a single frame of animation and what's in the background and everything. How things move, the physics of things. It's a beautiful show. And I think the ability to create such a beautiful show thus makes it more believable and thus more immersive. You believe it. and I love that for it. It is an amazing series. I can talk to death. Go check out my review. I think I did an extremely long review of it, so if you want more details, definitely go check that out, but I won't bore people here. Please go watch it. It is easily the #1 anime of 2021, and we'll see probably every single year until the show ends. Well, until it gets to about 50 episodes, because that's usually when I disqualify shows for anime of the year. But that's it. That is my top 10 favorite anime of 2021. Some honorable mentions: Mirako-chan, really absolutely love that series. Beastar's second season was incredible as well. Shadow House, I just cannot express enough. That is an amazing series. I'm heartbroken that I couldn't get it in the list. Nanan Biori Nonstop, that show continues to be an absolute gem. And obviously Vivi Floor Ice Song, again, another one that as much as I wanted to put it in the list, I think the only reason I think it kind of fell off the list is because that ending was quite a letdown for me. Even though it was a beautiful ending, it was a little bit let down having that bad guy antagonist character that just, whatever. But yeah, that's my top 10. I hope you guys enjoyed this list. If you did, leave a like down below. Comment again. Let me know what your top 10 is. If you can make a list, whatever you can put in there, that's fine. I don't expect everybody to have watched an insane amount of anime, but that is exactly what we do here, is try to help you find those gems that you may have missed. So if any of these in here you have not watched yet, please give them a shot. And I especially welcome you guys, if you have some time, I will leave a link down in the description below, which will link you to our anime podcast, where we essentially did a full-on deliberations of the entire year of anime into about 37 different categories. So if you look into some more deep dive of different categories, such as different genres, different themes, cutest characters, and all that kind of stuff, we definitely cover all that stuff in that podcast episode. So if you want to give it a listen, definitely do that. I kind of kept it to 5 in that one when we did our anime of the year, so this was a little bit more of an expansive list, which I definitely wanted to do. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and as always, I definitely appreciate you guys for supporting us and all the people that support us through Patreon or through our tips link in the description below. I thank you all for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, and y'all take care.